Hey guys, John Martindale from KItGuru here. Today we want to talk a little bit about the Nintendo Switch, Nintendo's upcoming system, because on Friday the 13th of January, KItGuru was invited down to the Hammersmith Apollo for the first hands-on event for the new console in the UK. Now if anyone's read some of my coverage of the event itself, you might know that I'm a little disappointed about the games lineup on the show and potentially when the console launches in March a little later this year. However, that doesn't mean that everything on show was a bust. There were a few interesting titles. Now, the first one I want to show you today is Mario Kart 8. This is obviously a port from the original Wii U version that's being brought over to the Switch in what Nintendo has described as a sort of enhanced manner. You can imagine this is a sort of a Game of the Year version of the game. Now, the version that I'm playing here is on the Switch itself, which means you've got the two Joy-Con controllers attached to the sides of the screen, and it looks and plays fantastically. If you've played Mario Kart 8, it's not really going to be that much different from what you're used to. But what's interesting to note here is that me and the other people in this demo area are all playing on separate Switches. This is no sort of split screen or sort of traditional local multiplayer. This is literally networking up 8 different consoles together. And this isn't necessarily a feature that I think is going to be that commonly used with the Switch, but it is an interesting bit of functionality that does also, allow us all to have our own separate screens. And I will say that the Switch in sort of handheld portable mode does look fantastic. Now moving forward, here, this is one of the other games that Nintendo had on show at the event. It was Fast RMX, which is, if you've ever played F-Zero or Wipeout, it's got a similar feel to it. It's not the most nuanced of games. I mean, it's sort of that traditional style of futuristic racer. There's a sort of interesting color switching mechanic, which anyone who played Ikaruga back on the GameCube or its more recent ports will be a little aware of. But it allows you to switch colors between your vehicle as you drive along the track, and then as you pick up sort of boost points or hit boost pads on the track, you can therefore increase your speed quite dramatically. What you'll probably see here is me performing absolutely terribly there, as I don't quite understand the color changing mechanic at this point. One of the slight downsides of this event is that while Nintendo had hired on a PR firm to conduct much of the booth operation at the event, they weren't necessarily the most knowledgeable of people. So I'll put the blame for my gameplay on at their feet rather than my own. But there you go, you can see me starting to get the hang of things a little bit here, although if I remember rightly I don't end up placing particularly well in this initial race. And the game looks pretty good. Color wise it seems a little drab compared to some of the others on show, and in a sort of typical Nintendo fashion you usually expect Nintendo games to be quite bright and colourful, and this doesn't necessarily subscribe to that. There was also it's not necessarily easy to see in the video, but there was also quite a bit of aliasing along the edges of the track, particularly on the barriers, which not the greatest thing to see, but this was perhaps the only game at the hands-on event where that was particularly noticeable. I was given the access to 3 different vehicles during testing, though I did only use the one for a few different races. There's a couple of tracks where there wasn't a huge amount of differences between them. There's a lot of riding on sort of sky rails and going through jungles and cities, and there's a few different environments, though it didn't feel like it changed the way the game played in a particularly different manner. Moving on now to the meatiest gaming session I had at the Switch handheld event, we've got The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. This is going to be the biggest launch title with the Switch, and with good reason, because this one has been in development for a long time. It was initially slated to come out on the Wii U, and will still make an appearance there when it does debut in March, but as a launch title for the Switch, this is a perfect choice, because it's a classic franchise, and alongside other games like Mario, which unfortunately won't be launching for the Switch, gives a good springboard for the console. It's a recognisable name, big franchise, and it's making a triumphant return in this new iteration. Now, as you watch some of the gameplay here, or if you've seen a little bit of gameplay before, you'll know that Breath of the Wild is more of a traditional Zelda game. It's much more like the originals, much more open world, much more exploration, there's crafting mechanics, there's side quests to do, but The big essence of the game is this is much more freeform than some of the prescribed sort of dungeon delving Zeldas that we've seen in more recent years. Off the bat, you can see even on with the poor lighting at this event, the game looks fantastic. We were told by the attendee at the event that the game runs at 1080p, though it does seem now that it's more closer to running at something like 900p, and then converts down to 720p when it's playing in portable mode on the Joy-Con attached Switch controller. In either guise, though, it looks absolutely phenomenal. It's got this very interesting art style, and the setting for the game is also quite different from what we've seen before. So this is set 100 years in the future in the world of Zelda, and Link, as he's sort of awoken here, is said to have been asleep for 100 years. Hyrule is not in particularly great condition, and it's going to be your job during the game to bring about its resurgence and try and bring it back to prosperity. Right after waking up, you're given this tablet-like accessory, which I did feel was some sort of nod to the Switch itself when it first showed up. But it's what you'll use to sort of record different parts of the world that then gives you access to new things. It sort of acts like a key. It's a very multi-purpose tool. And at this point in the game is your only accessory, though in short order we will find a few little extra bits of equipment like some trousers, which is always good, and a shirt, I think, at one point. There's a few other, there you go, you can see the inventory system there, which you go into a bit more detail. As a side note, the attendee that I had was clearly getting a little bored of walking people through the same 20 minutes of gameplay, and was very quick to point me in the right direction for things. So hopefully this is a relatively quick-paced bit of gameplay for you to see, though I did start to wander a few times because it tends to be the way I play these sort of open-world games. Now, the manner I was playing this game in, I was with the Joy-Cons, the two halves of the Nintendo Switch controller, attached to its central grip, which looks very much akin to a sort of a traditional controller, if a little more boxy. This meant that I wasn't playing on the Switch itself. This version of the system is all boxed up, as you can just about see in the low lighting there. It felt very natural to play it this way. The controls are all quite intuitive. If you've played console games in the past, you'll pick this up very quickly. Although the Joy-Cons are a little different, there's not much to it that will really surprise you. However, something that is quite different with the Switch, in particular its Joy-Con controllers, is what Nintendo's been terming its HD Rumble system, which we don't have a lot of information on how it works, but it's essentially a higher quality version of the Rumble Pack systems you've been used to with controllers in the past. This does a little more than just vibrate, in that it actually gives you the feeling of, it can give you much more detailed haptic feedback. You can feel as if there's something rattling around inside the controller, if that's what the developers choose, or they could make you feel tension, or in the case of Zelda, we're told that that's most apparent when you're using the bow, because as you draw back, you are able to feel the tension in the string as you increase. And it wasn't something that I was particularly aware of when I used the bow a little later, but perhaps with more playtime that would become more apparent. Now here you get your first view of just how good this game actually looks, and the draw distance is pretty phenomenal. And I'm told that everything you see here is something that you can visit later in the game, or quite quickly off the bat if you chose to, because although my attending PR person was quite keen to rush me along to the next quest marker to open up shrines and get the gameplay proper going, you can theoretically just pick a location and start wandering towards it. Now, I don't know whether there will be sort of traditional blockages, certain parts of the game that you require certain skills or equipment to bypass in order to make your way through them and to sort of funnel you down a certain path. But the game doesn't feel very railroady. It feels quite nuanced in the way you can just figure your way around things, and in this case you can see me playing around with a few of the climbing mechanics and trying not to die, because I'm very tempted to jump off the ledge here, but there, as I was quickly informed when I started to edge towards it, there is fall damage in the game, so if you throw yourself off cliffs you won't have a good time. There's a stamina gauge, is what you see popping up now and again, and that will prove detrimental to me later when I go swimming, because as it turns out, if you don't have enough stamina, you will drown. My weapon at this point is a branch. It's not particularly effective, and they do break very quickly. But you can, as you see, picking up mushrooms, and you can go around and gather a lot of different items and equipment just from exploring the forest environment around you. Here I was hoping to hunt the boar that was just disappeared off behind that tree, but they proved rather elusive, and as much as I would like to have engaged in a bit of stealth hunting gameplay, when you only have 20 minutes of game time, you don't necessarily want to spend that whole time creeping around. I liked how light the HUD was in the game. All you have are a small life bar, which is the traditional hearts up in the top left. You've got your mini-map in the bottom right, which isn't too intrusive. There's also a noise indicator, which lets you know how much noise you're making. And that's obviously very important when it comes to the stealth side of gameplay, because if you're sneaking up on things, being able to know whether they're going to hear you or not is pretty handy. You can throw most of the items you carry in the game, though that does add an increased risk of breakage, as with my unfortunate stick, which destroyed itself upon the stone column when I tried to throw it at a bird. Perhaps inadvisably, but I thought it was a reasonable attempt. You pick up a bow quite quickly in the game, as well as a few other little items like torches and a shield in the near future. And it all feels very intuitive. You can easily pick up and play this sort of part of the game. Never been a big Zelda gamer myself, but even with my limited experience, I was able to pick up quite a few different facets of the game right off the bat, and the open world nature is very appealing. If you like this sort of style of exploration, you're definitely going to enjoy this one. I can't speak for the expanded gameplay because my time with it was rather limited, but what I saw felt good, it played well. I'm interested to play more, and if there is any games that I saw throughout my time at the Switch hands-on event, Zelda Breath of the Wild is easily the game to buy the system for. That goes doubly so if you haven't played, or if you don't own a Wii U and have games like Mario Kart 8, then those two, when they're released a little later in the year, could be worth buying the system for. But right off the bat, Zelda Breath of the Wild is going to be the game to get the system for. Now, we recorded quite a bit of gameplay footage of Zelda. As I said, we had a good 20-minute session with it, so instead of me talking over it the entire way, I'll leave you to it for now, and I'll return once we get to some of the other games that the Switch event had on show.
I could see he was holding it down already. And then so he drops it. It's not a case of I kill something that's got an axe and he drops it back.
Another thing now, the shield slide, where you take out the shield, you can jump onto it, use it as a skateboard. Yeah. All you do is hold on your shield, and then jump for a second. days on it. That's it.
So that's going to be a fun part of it.
Really good. I think it's going to run down. So it's run down here.
Okay, we're back, and now we're looking at Splatoon 2. This is again a little bit like Mario Kart, in that this is feels more like an enhanced version of Splatoon 1 than a true sequel, even though Nintendo is calling it Splatoon 2. The gameplay feels and plays very similar to the original, which, if you're not familiar with it, involves running around painting the environment. Although this is a shooter, the aim is to take over the most territory by painting the map with your team's colour. You get a variety of weapons and items you can do this with, and those are expanded in Splatoon 2. But again, it doesn't feel too different to the original. It plays well, it looks fantastic, and will be another great title for the Switch when it becomes available a little later in 2017. Feels like it should be a launch title, especially since this is one of Nintendo's better new franchises released over the past few years. What I would hope to see is a lot more extended support for the game, so that we can see Splatoon 2 updated for years to come. Now, Just Dance 2017 is the next iteration of that very popular franchise. It's not something I have a particular interest in, but with the sort of casual nature of Nintendo's systems and the popularity of the original franchise, it's no real surprise that Just Dance is going to make a comeback. Now, this version does have a few extra features in it. It's got these sort of environment-based dance moves that you can do. Not something I'm going to be spending a lot of time doing, but there's no doubt going to be an audience for this sort of game, and it makes sense that Nintendo would look to bring something like this from the outset. Moving on though to something a little more gameplay heavy, we see this gentleman in the coat playing here is Arms, and his attacks there are a little frantic, it seems. Not the most nuanced of ways to control his character here, but Arms itself, a very interesting game. And I might even go so far as to say that out of everything I played, this was the one I had the most fun with. Now, Arms is a beat-em-up in a non-traditional style. It's sort of an over-the-shoulder third-person view. What you have are two boxing gloves or similar weapons on your fists that extend on these long arms, though they're more like slinkies, depending on the character you use. Now, this is all controlled with twin Joy-Con controllers, one in your left, one in your right. It's using the motion controller aspect of them. And as you punch, your character throws a punch, and as you twist, it can change the direction of the fist that you throw. Now, this opens up a lot of tactical play, where if your opponent is hiding behind an obstacle, for example, you can throw a punch that loops way out to the left and then swings back to the right at the last moment to catch them. You have special moves, there are grabs, there's all sorts of different weapon choices. I think there's a list of about 6 characters at launch, and there's a lot of potential here for this to be a really, really tactical game with a few strategic choices thrown in as well. I could almost see this becoming an esport, though, due to how beat-em-ups don't tend to capture the sort of mainstream when it comes to professional gaming. I doubt it's likely to be any sort of breakout title, but for the Switch, I think this is actually going to be one of the more exciting games it has on offer in its first year. You can see a couple of the different character choices on show here on the main sort of stage area. There tends to be a blend of 2 different character choices within the game, at least with the character selection choices I was given, which is you have the heavier characters, which do more damage, and you have the faster ones, which are able to use dodge mechanics a little more. Their weapons move a little faster, they're perhaps easier to hit opponents with, but they don't do as much damage, so there is that trade-off. I enjoyed the art style of the game. It's got a bit of a Team Fortress Overwatch feel to it, but it caters well to this sort of type of gameplay, where it's silly, but that doesn't take away from how serious you could take the gameplay. I think you could really go quite deep. Now, what you're looking at here is unlike any other game I ever played on a console before, because this is a game that charges you with not looking at the screen itself. It's called 1-2 Switch, and it's a full-priced game, but will be full of minigames. Think of it a little like Wii Sports. It's designed to showcase the technology inside these little Joy-Con controllers, which you can see each of the respective players in each scenario having one each. The first game is a quick draw scenario where you stare at each other, you wait for the timer to go off, and then you draw your Joy-Con as if it were a Wild West pistol, or revolver rather, and you shoot at each other. And the winner is the person who shoots first and is accurate. The second game, I'll be honest, don't really understand the point of it. It's very silly, and a little like the others is perhaps more designed for drunken office parties or get-togethers than it is for any sort of serious gameplay. This one is all about milking a cow, and you can see these gentlemen performing very suggestive motions as they milk the digital nipples on the screen. And I can't really believe we're talking about this, but this was happening at a Nintendo event, so what can you do? Not a fun game by any means, I'll be honest. The milking game just didn't need to be part of the package. Other ones, however, were a little more interesting. The quick draw one, as I mentioned, was quite fun, and there's definitely an element of psyching out your opponent by staring them in the eyes, trying to time what they're doing. The best one, though, arguably, is Samurai Training, which you can see me having a quick go at here. Now, Samurai Training involves one of you having a digital sword and attempting to cut the other one. And the job of the second player is to catch the blade, which is my job straight off the bat here. So the idea is, once again, you stare away from the screen at your opponent, directly in the eyes in this case, and the cutter has got to try and psych out the opponent to try and make them mistime their clap. Think of it as a bit like playing old school game of slap in the playground. Obviously, I didn't do the best job right off the bat there, but this is my first time. I am a samurai in training after all, so we'll move on to my second attempt, which I think is a little more successful. And me and the gentleman here actually did end up going back and forth a few times, where each of us catching each other's blade quite successfully. So I can imagine how this would be quite a lot of fun with people you know, as you try and figure out their system, as you try and catch them unawares, catch them off guard. It's fun. I don't know if the collection of minigames are something I would want to pay full price for. This feels like something that should be part of the Switch main bundle, kind of like the way Wii Sports was. I'm surprised Nintendo hasn't done that. But when you combine this game with there's a safe cracking one, and supposedly a few other minigames too, it might be worth it. The last game we'll look at today is one I didn't get to try personally, and it's called Snipperclips Cut It Out Together, which is an adorable little puzzle game that Nintendo has put together that takes place within the confines of a notebook. Players are charged with solving puzzles together, which can mean cutting out various parts of the notebook, making changes to it, and figuring out how to adjust the sort of physics of the world to get through the various challenges that you're faced with. It uses the Joy-Con controllers in a side-on manner, which works reasonably well and shows how multiplayer focused this sort of console is, especially with a local element to it. So there we have it, the Nintendo Switch hands-on event. Not the most impressive lineup of games, but certainly a few interesting titles that we're going to be keeping an eye on throughout the rest of the year.